Okay, so now we've got our hardware installed and our electronics connected up. The last thing we need to do is just a basic setup, just to make sure the guitar plays well. Now this will just be a basic setup, so you'll probably want to refine, make more adjustments after you become more accustomed to the guitar, particularly the neck. But for now, we're just going to cover the three main areas. That's going to be neck relief. Essentially, we want a small amount of relief in the neck so that we don't have the strings buzzing against the frets. We want to check the string action, which is the height of the strings from the fretboard, and that can also affect fret buzz, but mostly it's going to affect playability. And lastly, we'll check intonation, which involves making some adjustments here at the bridge, just to make sure the guitar is in tune with itself. Okay, so it's important. First thing we do is get the guitar in concert pitch. So we want to make sure that we've got the right amount of tension on the neck at all times whenever we're making adjustments. Okay, so there's a couple of ways to check for neck relief. Could use a steel rule running between the D and G strings, just resting on the frets. Just get down to eye level and check for clearance toward the middle of the fretboard. There's no hard and fast rules for what measurement that should be. It's mostly arbitrary. It depends really on what you prefer. But perhaps a more intuitive way to check is just to fret at the first fret, last fret, and just tap down on that 12th fret. Now if the string was laying dead against, like flat against those frets, I would need to increase the amount of relief. This one's not too bad. You can see the string's still able to be pressed down. But if I wanted to increase the amount of relief, what I would need to do, firstly take the truss rod adjustment key from your packaging. Now I've removed the base screw on this truss rod plate, and then you would put the Allen key in. Now in this case, I want to loosen. So I'm taking tension off the neck by reducing or loosening the truss rod that's running through the neck. That will allow the tension of the strings then to introduce more relief to the guitar. I would just turn about 1/8 of a turn to start with and check that. Now if you wanted to reduce the amount of relief, you would turn it clockwise, and that would tighten the truss rod and that would flatten the neck out. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at is our string action. So I'm just going to bring the camera back around again. So action, again, it's fairly subjective. If you're not sure, probably a good starting point is about 2.4 mil on the 12th fret. Just remember you're measuring from the top of the fret to the underside of the string, about 1.6 on the high E side. So what you're going to do is just run your steel rule across the top of the frets, and that's probably just a little bit high. And we're pretty good on the high E side. So when you're adjusting your action, we're just turning the two bridge posts. So as I said, this action is just a little high. So to reduce that, just to drop that down, I would tighten this, and that will recess the post further into the bushing, and that will lower the action. And that's pretty much spot on. Okay, so the last thing we need to check is the intonation. Now the intonation is just checking the guitar's in tune with itself. Now, you might notice, if you look at the bridge, for example, it's on an angle, and that's to compensate for the additional mass of these strings. So I'll just bring the camera around again. So I'll just check our tuning again. Now tuning will change definitely since we made an adjustment to the post. And as you can see, I'm tuned. And when I fret at the 12th fret, which is an octave up, we should also be seeing an E on our tuner. So if I bring the camera back around, you can see we're actually quite sharp. Now it's important that you hit with the same attack. Now because we're sharp, we need to compensate more for the mass of that string. So we need to adjust the scale length of that string. What I would do next is just make minor adjustments to the individual saddles. So you'll see intonation screws on the inside of the bridge. If I turn that counterclockwise, that's going to push that saddle further back on the bridge. You can see this is the point of contact for the strings between the saddle and the nut. So that has increased the length of the vibrating string now. If we bring the camera around now, you can see we've We're still a little sharp, but we're much closer. So again, you can make more wholesale changes by adjusting the screws here. Now obviously the tighter that screw is, the less or the more the angle is favoring the low E string or the bass strings, and you can then make minor adjustments with the individual saddles. So turn counterclockwise to move the saddle back further in the bridge, clockwise obviously to bring it forward, and you would bring it forward if the note was flat at the 12th fret. Now unfortunately I'm left-handed, so it's going to be a little tricky for me to do a full demonstration on this guitar, but we will just give the guitar a quick sound test. So first I'm going to back the volume and tone right off. And we'll just check our volume's working. And we'll check our tone. And here that's coming in nicely. Okay, now the next thing I would do, turn the guitar flat out, take your hands away from the guitar, and hopefully you're not hearing any interference, any signs of hum or electrical interference. Now if you did have a problem there, this is a fairly simple circuit. What I do is just go back into the electronics cavity and check your ground circuit. It's possible that those black wires that we soldered earlier, one of those has come loose, or you've got a connection issue there. Now the last thing I would check is just the neck itself. I'd run it up and down each fret on each string of the guitar, and what you're listening for there is fret bars or any dead notes. And if you do come across any problems like that, again you would just adjust the action or have a look at the amount of neck relief you've got. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed building your LPJ guitar kit as much as I have. Thanks for watching.